Hi, this is Stan Bush.
Hi, this is Stephanie Calvert.
This is John Payne.
This is Jack Hughes.
Hey everyone, this is Britt Lightning from Vixen.
Hi, I'm Carrie Stevens.
Hello, I'm Kofi Baker.
And you're listening to Play That Rock and Roll.
Okay, well, now I would like to pivot to a book that you published originally quite a while ago now, Traveling Man, which you wrote with Tom Weschler. Like I said, I got this book at the Detroit Historical Museum, which was very cool. Tom's photos are all over that exhibit, and they're awesome. So take me a little bit back to the writing of this book. What inspired you guys to put this one out?
I'll take credit for this one as my idea. My idea. Tom is a friend. I've known him for years. Our couple of our youngest kids went to school together, even, and he did a gallery exhibit of his photos in general. He has photos from the legendary Grande Ballroom and things like that. And the thing I told him at the end of it, I said, Tom, the photos are great, but next time let me write your captions that you include on the photos. But that started the discussion of, I think you got a book in here. Yeah. And we looked through his whole collection. We came up with a bunch of ideas, but it kept coming around to, the best stuff you have is Bob Seger, because he was Seger's tour manager for a while and kind of personal assistant and aide-de-camp and photographer. Yeah. And he had this great collection of, as you see in the book, very intimate personal photos of Bob. In addition, it just wasn't the photos of Bob Seger on stage. You have him bare-chested playing acoustic guitar in the recording studio. You have him with his cars or just hanging out and things like that. And then you did have very rare concert photos, like playing the opening of one of our suburban malls here.
Oh, yeah.
And things like that, or being on TV. So we finally said, and, because he was part of the Seger camp, he was a little bit concerned about, doing that. But, we finally decided, let's get it out. We don't need permission. You own these photos. Let's go for it. And so I put us together and I conceived the layout and how the book would go. It is Tom's memories that, I interviewed him, throughout and created this. And then we, went to Wayne State University Press here, which I thought would be interested in doing it, and they were. Very, very much so. And we just went from there. And it's the Wayne State Press's biggest non-textbook seller of all time. There wasn't anything out about Seger. That was the other motivation. And when we did talk to Seger's management and such, one of the things I pointed out to him was, wouldn't you want the first book about Bob Seger to come from a friendly situation rather than just have somebody come in and write a book?
Yeah, no kidding. That is kind of my first thought about seeing that book. It dawned on me. I have a bookshelf here full of rock biographies and memoirs and all that stuff. And it boggles my mind that an artist at the stature of Bob Seger, I don't think there is like a full biography out there about him.
There's one that I know of that was completely third party.
Okay.
No original source material. And they're just not interested, the Seger camp.
Yeah.
They've been approached many times. People call me all the time. How do I get a hold of these guys to do it? And it's like, here you go. Good luck.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, it's not something they're interested in. Bob's certainly a good enough writer. I think he could do it with just a good editor, without a ghostwriter.
Sure.
Or a partner, writer. He could probably do it himself, but for whatever reason, and there's a lot of things in Seger world that they haven't been interested in that other artists are routinely interested in. Like, where's the Bob Seger box set?
Yeah.
Where was the Bob Seger MTV Unplugged?
Oh, oh,
that type of thing. Just not with their, you got to respect that it's not what they want to do.
yeah.
So they haven't.
And he was slow to get his music on streaming too, wasn't he?
Slow on streaming, slow on making music videos. He is a classic rock artist with a capital C and a capital R. They play arena concerts, they make albums, they still deal with, they up to the very end, they dealt with radio. Rock
Yeah.
radio is the most important vehicle for them to promote themselves. That's where they are, that's their lane. And they stayed in it all the way until he stopped.
Well, I gotta hand it to. I mean, you gotta hand it to him for the consistency at least. But
And the honesty
yeah,
and the authenticity.
yeah,
Bob Seger is Bob Seger's authentic self, and was all the way through. And even though the people who do love him and love the music and would want him to have become Bruce Springsteen or Post Malone, or Zach Clark, not Zach Clark, Zach Bryan. Um, you know, it's not what they wanted to do.
does this have connections to like or an explanation of why so much of the music that is cataloged in this book didn't really make the jump to CDs? Because I know there was the early Seeger a compilation that came out in 2009, but like when I read about these albums, a lot of them never made it past vinyl for a while.
Well, for a while, they got him out, and most of his catalog is available,
Okay.
save for those three Warner Brothers records he did. And I don't know exactly what the contractual morass behind those are, and I know he's not necessarily fond of all of them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But they should, as a matter of record, they should still come out.
Yeah.
People should have them. And listen, this guy, when we talked about no box set, Bob Seger is like the guy they invented the box set for. He's
Yeah.
got so much in his vaults and good material. Yeah, really good stuff. It's a shame that it's just sitting there. And I don't know if it's going to take selling it to, a BMG or one of the other catalog companies, for a third party to get in and say, look, this is good stuff. It's got to come out,
Yeah.
or what it's going to take. But it is what it is, and we certainly here on Ground Zero in Detroit, we accept that that's the will of Bob Seger.
Yep, fair enough. Oh, okay, well, let me ask you a question about one song that's somewhere in that archive that I'm sure no one's really clamoring for and isn't like maybe good per se, but you're the only person I can think of that I can even ask about this song because I couldn't find any information about it. Uh, I found a song called Ballad of the Yellow Beret
Yep.
that, that Bob sang on.
Fearless cowards of the USA, bravely here at home they stay. They watch their friends get shipped away. The draft dodgers of the Yellow Beret.
Kind of funny, but it seems to fly totally in the face of what his actual politics are. Do you know anything about that song, or what was the deal?
I mean, it was just a song. It was kind of a goof.
Yeah,
It was written during the in the 60s, during the Vietnam, I think it's 60s, if not early 70s, during the Vietnam War. And it's a bit of it's a bit of an honest song, and it's a bit of a parody, making fun obviously of the draft dodgers and,
right.
those who don't want to, don't want to serve. But, you can read that song, like a few different ways. Like I said, it could be a parody. You could be viewed as a parody or just a goof. But it was very topical to what was around for a while, and that's one I'd be very surprised if we ever saw get a wide release, and partly because it was very much of its time.
Yeah,
I think if God forbid the draft was ever reinstated, it would have a moment again. But it's but it was of its time back then.
Yeah, and then he follows it up a couple years later with 2 + 2 =
Right.
question mark, which is a total reverse of that. Yeah, I found that song and it did make me laugh, but it did make me think like, it must have been some sort of joke that was
Yeah, kind of
in the
like
social circle.
like I say, parody.
Yeah. Moving forward a couple of decades, let's zoom up to the decade you wrote about recently. I did notice, of course, that Bob is not included in this edition. So, I think we would agree that his 90s output wouldn't
Right.
necessarily be essential for his catalog, let alone the 90s, like you said. But how would you describe what Bob was doing in the 90s?
Bob was more interested, I think, in the 90s in, exploring a little bit. I think there was a period in the 90s because he was gone. He was out of sight,
Yeah.
for big gaps in the 90s. And I think he kind of lost a little interest, you know, I really do. He was looking to settle down a little more, maybe, start a family, uh, and just he didn't have the same drive
Mm,
that he had back in the 70s and into maybe say the mid 80s. This is a guy who, 200 plus shows a year for a great many years, and he burned it real hard.
yeah.
He kept writing, he remained creative, but he didn't feel like playing the game.
Yeah. Uh, another question that I bet you don't have a specific number for, but how many times have you seen Bob in concert?
Somewhere in the 40s,
Or oh wow, okay. So
maybe in the
going
50s.
back, maybe a better question is, going back how long?
Going back to the Against the Wind tour, I was actually working did a summer with a concert promoter in Pittsburgh, and which is where I grew up, and we had, I see 2 nights, 2 Seeger shows at our big arena. So, the first time I saw him and blown away. I
Yeah.
mean, just a tremendous, tremendous show. And then, of course, when I arrived in Detroit working, as a music journalist at the daily paper, was when The Distance came out. And at that point, it was, ooh, it's been 2 years.
Oh
Little did we know what we
yeah.
were in store for, but that was a big gap. And also, that's when I first got to meet and interview him and start to really write about.
Wow. I saw him probably 4 times across the last decade of him touring. Some of the best shows I've ever seen. Had a lot of fun at all those. But it did make me think like, as I feel with every classic rock show I go to, like it would have been amazing to see them back in their prime. When you think back to all the Bob shows you've seen, what are some of your favorite memories of seeing him on stage?
I mean, that first one and that was still the long-haired Bob Seger, and they were still playing a lot of the older catalog at that
Okay.
point. So, that was like getting, Live Bullet mix. Well, it's on the Nine Tonight
Okay.
live album, but there was that. There was seeing him for the first time in Detroit at Cobo Arena, where they recorded Live Bullet and parts of Nine Tonight, and they refer to as the house that Bob built. And that was just a moment. I felt like I was getting a little bit of Detroit history in that. He did a show for one of the tours. It was at Pine Knob, the outdoor venue here, our Alpine Valley. There was just something in the air at that show when he hit the stage, and the roar from the crowd, let you were really here in a special moment. And so many of the other shows that have specific memories to them were more like personal circumstances. Like the
Yeah.
last time I saw him was on the last tour, and he played back in Pittsburgh, and we went to see that. So to see him for the last time back in the place where I saw him for the first time, it was special. And by some circumstances, we were in a box with one of the Pittsburgh Steelers owners, and Franco Harris comes walking into the box. So the last time I saw Bob Seger, in the place I saw Bob Seger the first time, with Franco freaking Harris next to me, was so that was a special memory that has a little to do with Bob, but a lot to do with some other things.
Oh, that is freaking awesome. Yeah, you know, I'm glad you mentioned Alpine Valley because I don't know if you know this, but there's a fairly famous Bob Seger concert at Alpine Valley here that I've heard on our radio station from time to time as mentioned as like one of the best ever Milwaukee area concerts. I think it was like '87, Alpine Valley in '87. And you know, I've looked for bootlegs, but I can't find it. But that always pops in my mind as like, you know, he must have been he was obviously a great live act. So okay, my last Bob Seger question for you before we get out of here is, you know, obviously he's got these iconic big hit records in the late '70s, early '80s. What would you point? Where would you point someone who wants just to go a little bit deeper into his catalog? Maybe some stuff that's a little overlooked. What do you think is his best stuff that's underrated?
I mean, yeah, you always, even though it was a big hit album, I would still turn people on to Live Bullet because he was also still playing some of the deeper material. The problem with sending people back to the early Bob Seger albums is they don't sound particularly good. You know, it wasn't really until Night Moves that they started to sound like not just contemporary albums, but timeless albums. And so while there are some interesting songs before that, you know, just the albums don't really hold up sonically,
Yeah.
like they should. But you know, I would give somebody Live Bullet.
Yeah.
You know, so to hear some of that stuff, I give somebody Night Moves because there were a lot of songs on Night Moves that did not make, you know, make it, and some of that, I mean, I do, you know, I do like some of the later albums. Yeah, I think there was some good material on them. The Distance, I got to tell you, The Distance is my favorite Bob Seger album.
Oh, nice.
It came from a very interesting place, and the story behind some of those songs, you know, were really, really interesting. He had clearly, in that 2 years, what do you mean 2 years between albums, that he took off, he had really very clearly lived a life.
Yeah.
And he put him into some very rich songs. And, you know, Ride Out, I thought in 2014, I thought that was a pretty good album too.
Oh, that one knocked me out. I was surprised by that one. I love
Yeah.
the song that's the Hey Gypsy, a tribute to Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
I that one, you know, knocked me out when I saw it in concert. Okay, I forgot to ask you this before.
Sure.
Did yes or no, did Chevy ruin Like a Rock?
Chevy, the most dependable, longest lasting trucks on the road.
No. No.
Okay.
It, you know, I think for a minute people were upset about it. But then when you start to think about it, okay, if Bob Seger's going to license a song to anybody, shouldn't it be a Detroit car company?
Oh yeah. No,
Yeah, first an American automotive company and then a Detroit one. Yeah, you know, I mean, I think that was more a matter of the timing. We were still a little sketchy about hearing Robert Plant sing about Coca-Cola and Steve Winwood, you know,
oh,
and
Michelob.
Genesis do Michelob, and Eric Clapton, a recovered alcoholic. You know, it was still kind of a sketchy time. Now we wouldn't blink an eye.
Right.
I mean, if anything, you'd say, geez, Bob should have done with that ad what Springsteen did with the Jeep commercial.
Oh.
You know, he should have turned it into basically a music video.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, that's funny.